I was just wondering how you're going to be, at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Are you prepared?
I'm prepared. I'm all right with it.
Aileen Wuornos, victim or monster? It's unlikely that any of the relatives of Aileen Wuornos' 7 victims shed a tear when she was executed in Florida on the 9th of October 2002. For some of them, the woman labelled a man-hating lesbian serial killer by the media could not die soon enough. A hitchhiking prostitute who led men to their deaths along the highways of North and Central Florida, Wuornos presented an easy hate figure for the God-fearing folk of Florida. But behind the lurid headlines is an all-too-human story in which some people see Wuornos as a victim of circumstance. Delving into Wuornos' past, we uncover a bruising litany of repeated abuse and rejection. At 9 years old, she was already having sex with boys from her area, and at 13, she gave birth to a baby, fathered perhaps by the local paedophile. She was thrown out of her home and disowned by the community, left to live in cars and nearby woods, apparently unnoticed by welfare officers. Later she hitchhiked to Florida and turned to prostitution. Aileen Wuornos was born Aileen Carol Pittman in Troy, Michigan on February 29, 1956. It was a tough start for little Aileen, with both parents divorcing just 2 months before her birth. Aileen never met her father, Leo Dale Pittman, who was in jail at the time of her birth. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and later convicted of sex crimes against children. He eventually committed suicide by hanging himself in prison. When Wuornos was almost 4 years old, her mother Diane abandoned her children, leaving Aileen and her brother Keith with their maternal grandparents, Laurie and Britta Wuornos, who legally adopted them in the 1960s. By the age of 11, Wuornos began engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs and food. She'd also engaged in sexual activities with her brother. Wuornos said that her alcoholic grandfather had sexually assaulted and beaten her when she was a child. Before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes and humiliate her. In 1970, at the age of 14, she became pregnant, having been raped by an accomplice of her grandfather. Wuornos gave birth to a boy at a home for unwanted mothers on March 23, 1971. The child was placed up for adoption. A few months after having her son, she dropped out of school. At the same time, her grandmother died of liver failure. When Wuornos was 15, her grandfather threw her out of the house and she began supporting herself as a prostitute and living in the woods near her old home. Wuornos' criminal troubles started at the age of 18 when she was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for DUI and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was later charged with failure to appear. In 1976, Wuornos hitchhiked to Florida. There she met 69-year-old yacht club president Louis Gratz Fell. They married quickly, and their wedding announcement was even printed in the local newspaper society pages. However, Wuornos continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar and went to jail briefly for assault. She also hit Fell with his own cane, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. She returned to Michigan the same year, where she was arrested in Antrim County and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. Later that year, her brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, and Wuornos received $10,000 from his life insurance. Wuornos and Fell annulled their marriage on July the 21st after only 9 weeks. In August 1976, Wuornos was given a $105 fine for drunk driving. She used the money inherited from her brother to pay the fine and spent the rest within 2 months buying luxuries, including a new car, which she wrecked shortly afterwards. In 1981, Wuornos was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for the armed robbery of a convenience store where she stole just $35 and 2 packets of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison on May 4, 1982 and was released June 30, 1983. She was arrested again in 1984 for attempting to pass forged checks at a bank in Key West, and in 1985 she was a named suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County. The problems kept coming and Aileen's rap sheet kept growing. In 1986, Wuornos was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing a fake ID in her aunt's name. Miami police officers found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. On June 2nd, 1986, Volusia County deputy sheriffs detained Wuornos for questioning after a male companion accused her of putting a gun in his car and demanding $200. Wuornos was found to be carrying spare ammunition, and police discovered a .22 under the passenger seat she had sat in. Around this time, Wuornos met Tyra Moore, a hotel maid at the Daytona Beach gay bar. They moved in together, and Wuornos supported them with her earnings as a prostitute. In 1987, Daytona Beach police detained Wuornos and Moore at a bar for questioning regarding an incident in which they were accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. In 1988, Wuornos accused Daytona Beach bus driver of assault. She claimed that he had pushed her off the bus following a confrontation. Moore was listed as a witness to the incident. Up until her execution, Wuornos claimed to still be in love with Moore. Aileen gained her notoriety and the name Monster for her serial killing spree, where she killed 7 men within a 12-month period. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, aged 51, in November 30th, 1989. Mallory had been brutally shot several times, with 2 bullets in his left lung found to have been the cause of death. This was the first murder at the hands of Wuornos, using a .22 caliber pistol in a secluded area of the forest. Wuornos claimed that Mallory had raped her, and she had in turn defended herself using the .22 caliber weapon that she possessed. Richard Mallory was, although the court at the time of the trial would never know, a violent man who often frequented strip clubs and used the services of prostitutes. Mallory's financial records revealed that he was on the verge of bankruptcy and had also spent time in a mental institution on the charge of attempted rape. The aforementioned information regarding Richard Mallory's background, specifically the charge of attempted rape, make it quite plausible for the account that Wuornos made to be true. Was Richard Mallory the trigger for the following 6 murders that would occur? The second victim was David Spears, aged 43, a construction worker from the Winter Garden. On June 1st, 1990, his naked body was found along Florida State Road 19 in Citrus County. He'd been shot 6 times. Spears' body, similarly to Mallory, was located in a secluded area with the fatal injuries caused by the discharge of a .22 caliber pistol. In regards to physical appearance, there was also a likeness to Richard Mallory, and both men were middle-aged. David Spears, in one source of reference, is described as being practical, predictable, honest and hard-working, which does not fit the description of the type of man that Wuornos would later go on to state in the trial into the crime. It does not seem possible to imagine that David Spears, who was still ensuring that his ex-wife was financially secure, would be capable of viciously attacking a woman as Wuornos had claimed. Charles Chuck Carskadon was the third victim of Aileen Wuornos. Similarly to the previous victims, he was also middle-aged and described as being a decent human being. Carskadon's body was located in a secluded area. Originally, Wuornos stated, as with the case of Mallory and Spears, that she'd reacted in a manner that she did out of self-defense, although she did later alter the versions of events to state that she had committed cold-blooded murder. Carskadon had been shot fatally using a .22 caliber pistol exactly 9 times. If Wuornos was in fact acting in self-defense, why would she need to shoot Carskadon the amount of times that she chose to do? Peter Seams, aged 65, was a retired merchant seaman who devoted much of his time to a Christian outreach ministry. Peter Seams was the 4th victim of Aileen Wuornos. Although unlike the case of Mallory, Spears and Carskadon, the location of Seams' body was never found. According to one source, Peter Seams was deeply religious, easygoing and considered a real gentleman, which does not reflect the description that Wuornos gave of him in court during her trial. Peter Seams was 65 years of age at the time of his murder, and this fact also makes it hard to believe that a man described by many as decent would be capable of viciously attacking a woman. Eugene Troy Burris was the fifth victim of Aileen Wuornos. Burris was roughly the same age as Mallory, Spears and Carskadon, and his body was also located in a secluded area. Burris was hard-working and a respected member of the community. Why would such a man attack a woman that would cause her to shoot him with a .22 caliber pistol twice? Charles Dick Humphreys was the sixth victim of Aileen Wuornos. He was a retired US Air Force major, former state child abuse investigator, and former chief of police. He was 56 years of age at the time of his death, which is relatively close to the ages of the other victims of Wuornos. Humphreys was a family man who was dedicated to his work. Following a further investigation, it was ruled that the cause of death was a result of 7 gunshot wounds to the body. The murder weapon responsible for the death of Mr. Humphreys was identified as a .22 caliber pistol. Walter Gino Antonio was the seventh victim of Aileen Wuornos. Antonio was a hard-working individual who works as a truck driver and also as a reserve police officer. Gino Antonio's nearly naked body was discovered in a secluded area with fatal injuries sustained as a result of multiple gunshot wounds from a .22 caliber pistol. 5 days later, his car was found in Brevard County. Wuornos told several inconsistent stories about the killings. She claimed initially that all 7 men had raped her while she was working as a prostitute, but later recanted the claim of self-defense, citing robbery and a desire to leave no witnesses as the reason for murder. During an interview with filmmaker Nick Broomfield, when she thought that the cameras were off, she told him that in fact it was self-defense, but she could not stand being on death row, where she'd been for 10 years at that point and wanted to die. Assessed using the psychopathy checklist, Wuornos scored 32 out of 40. The checklist evaluates individuals on a 20-item list of antisocial and interpersonal behaviours, with each of them being scored at 0, 1 or 2, and thus a maximum score of 40. Depending on location and research perspective, scores above 25 or 30 are consistent with a diagnosis of psychopathy. Aileen had a controversial trial and was eventually convicted and sentenced to death for 6 of the murders. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9th, 2002. She declined her last meal, which could have been anything under $20, and opted for a cup of coffee instead. Aileen Wuornos was the subject of 2 movies in 2003. The Hollywood movie called Monster, which starred Charlize Theron as Wuornos. It chronicled Wuornos' story from childhood until her first murder conviction. The film earned Theron an Academy Award for Best Actress. The second film is called Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, which was a 2003 feature-length documentary about Aileen made by Nick Broomfield. She was the 10th woman in the United States and the 2nd in Florida to be executed since the 1976 United States Supreme Court decision restoring capital punishment.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I lost my fucking life because of it. Couldn't even get a fair trial. Couldn't even get a fair investigation or nothing. Couldn't even have my appeals right. You sabotaged my ass, society, and the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed. It was used for books and movies and shit. Ladder climbs, the re-election, everything else. I got a big finger in all your faces. Thanks a lot. You're an inhumane bunch of fucking living bastards and bitches, and you're gonna get your asses nuked in the end. And pretty soon it's coming.
So there you have it, folks. What do you think about Aileen Wuornos? Monster or victim? I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching.